Chapter 477. After probing twice, she found that everything was calm and there was no response from the higher-ups. Wuxia directly announced a new treatment plan for cancer. Together with her new medical cabin, as long as the patient was not dying, the cancer cells would be completely killed in one day at most. It was a worldwide shock. There was no doubt that the Nobel Prize in Medicine would belong to her. Her name had already entered some medical textbooks, and patients all over the world who were suffering from terminal diseases saw hope. In a short time, a huge amount of willpower entered the balance of order. The young lady was so beautiful that she walked with the wind. She and Diana learned from each other all day long and suppressed each other for the first time, achieving a glorious result of both career and love. She relied on her own technology to gain great popularity, and the Quinn Merlin group also rose. More than a dozen scientists in the medical department did not sleep every day to compare experimental reports, for fear of mistakes. Many young people also came to apply for jobs. It was fine if the pay was low, but they wanted to add the name of the Quinn Group to their resume. Scholars and scientists from all over the world came to visit. The Quinn Group set up a reception department of hundreds of people to deal with learning discussions and exchange experiences from all walks of life. Compared to Luther, who hid underground every day to do his experiments, Thea's reputation suddenly reached the level of Buddha. She did not slack off and gave speeches everywhere to increase her reputation. Even the medical staff who lost their jobs because of her medical cabin did not dare to publicly scold her now. Her reputation was too high. At this time, Thea was in the Buckingham Palace in England. She was interviewed by the Times and said the content hundreds of times. She changed a few words and said it once with emotion and emotion to complete the task. After the interview, Thea also met the Queen of England. The old lady looked very kind, holding her hand and chatting. The old lady did not know that she was lucky. If this was still a feudal society, the young lady would have pulled out the sword of victory and pledge and asked to inherit the throne of England. Thea casually said a few words and then left. She did not go straight home, but went to Diana's new apartment. "What's wrong? Something on your mind?" Diana was not in the mood tonight. The two of them were only wearing pajamas. Thea asked in a low voice, "I can't say for sure. I feel uneasy, as if something is about to happen." Thea couldn't guess such a vague and ambiguous thing, so the two could only hug each other to sleep. The matter of the special medicine was about to come to an end, and the path of obtaining the power of will had just begun. In that indescribable ancient country, there was a saying that there were three immortals. To establish virtue was to establish morality. To establish virtue was to say something with penetrating insight. Neither of these two were suitable for today's utilitarian era, but to establish merit was feasible. In fact, the starting point of Luther and the military's plan was also related to this. They were either billionaires or high-ranking officials, so they didn't have many pursuits for themselves. This was why they came up with the so-called Cadmus Plan and the Yamadan Plan for the future of humanity. The starting point was good, but their actions were too self-centered, and they didn't really put the welfare of the ordinary people first. They never considered what ordinary people lacked. Instead, they considered what they should give to ordinary people. This so-called democratic system was, in fact, an elite system for the minority. Thea herself was also a beneficiary of this system. She didn't have the sentiments of those great sages who claimed to change certain realities. She could only do what she could to make the lives of ordinary people better. Physical illness was the first step, and cultural dissemination was the second step. Ordinary people on Earth were too backward. They didn't care about darkside, and many people were unwilling to believe in the existence of aliens. They stubbornly followed their own path of life, working, studying, and living. This was the current situation of ordinary people. Thea hoped that through her own efforts, she could change the minds of ordinary people. Aliens weren't as bad as in the movies. Many alien technology products were very convenient and should be introduced. She even encouraged some scientists to go out instead of cooped up in the laboratory thinking about how to blow up Earth. The road had to be taken step by step. At the very least, some ideas had to be changed. Otherwise, it would be too tiring for her to be the only one leading the way. She couldn't drive a car to work in the morning and take a maglev back home at night. The technological leap wasn't that fast, so she needed some time to adapt. As for the new breakthrough, the scene of Superman and Diana learning the Tamaran language gave her some inspiration. Learn the universal language. General Lane and the others had just taken their seats in the Alien Management Committee when Thea dropped a bombshell and asked them to discuss it. The meeting this time was very important. The black man, Digger, had come as a temporary service member and handed over documents to the representatives. He was also a little nervous because as a middle-level member of the administrative committee, he was also required to learn the common language. God had mercy on him. He only knew English and a few Afghan phrases like surrender and kneel down. Learning something as high-end as the universal language was giving him a headache. He was having a headache because his perspective was too low. The other participants understood the implications, especially when the military was trying to crack the Kryptonian spaceship. Language was a stumbling block, and they were the ones who were most affected by it. Looking at the bitter faces of these people, Sia wanted to laugh. Her memories as a transmigrator made her realize how terrible it was for all the people in this country to learn English. It was the cycle of life, and now it was time for them to taste the bitterness of it. As for asking all the aliens in the universe to speak English, even the most arrogant and irrational general in the military wouldn't say that. Everyone, we will have to leave Earth sooner or later. The era is advancing rapidly. Learning the language and communicating with the aliens on an equal footing should be the responsibility of the committee. Thea easily put the project on her shoulders. The white people who slaughtered the Native Americans had the most right to say what would happen if they didn't communicate with the aliens. Dr. Quinn, what do you mean? Joan Finch was a 50-year-old middle-aged woman who represented the government in Kentucky. She had no problem convincing her constituents, but she couldn't help but tremble when she was in a weak position and had to communicate with the aliens. Thea saw her sallow face and knew that she had misunderstood. This pure politician probably thought that she was going to attack with a spaceship. What I mean is very simple. It's just a preliminary preparation. Based on the principle of voluntary participation, we will neither advertise nor ignore it. We will publish a set of teaching materials in the name of the committee. Anyone who wants to learn can buy them. The middle-aged woman's face regained some color. General Lane and Steve Trevor were both patients with persecutory delusions. For them, it was always good to be prepared. Unless Earth conquered the universe, learning the alien language was a hurdle that couldn't be avoided. Chapter 478. The committee's daily expenses were in the hundreds of thousands, so the learning materials that were mentioned didn't cost much. Several people agreed with Thea's proposal, but each of them went back and told the big shots behind them about today's far-reaching, small matter. The few big shots had higher expectations. Perhaps some of them only wanted to preserve what they had, but this was not something they could change. When the aliens came knocking on their door, they would be the first to suffer losses. Compared to Luther and the military's method of focusing on making big weapons, Sia's method of silently moisturizing things made people feel comfortable. It was not difficult to guess their thoughts. If Luther succeeded and wanted to use force to gain more power, who among the politicians would give him a place? Or let him wipe out everyone and become a dictator? Thea's method was very popular with the politicians, and no one stopped her. The learning materials that she wrote in the name of the committee chairman were quickly produced. There was no shortage of people with foresight. The first 100,000 sets of learning materials were sold out before they even entered the market. People like Luther directly bought 1,000 sets and distributed them to the people in the company. Those who couldn't learn were directly kicked out. Bruce Wayne also bought a few sets and prepared to give them to the Bat team. Leaders of various countries, foreign affairs personnel, spy organizations, whether it was the king or the president, more or less bought a few sets. It wasn't a nuclear weapon, and the Americans were open-minded enough to let them pass, as they had the intention of dealing with the big trouble together. After that, Thea urgently produced more than 100,000 sets. This time, the sales were relatively weak. Many ordinary people thought it was an April Fool's joke, and only a few people realized something. But after all, they were the minority, and their opinions were quickly drowned in the laughter of the crowd. Thea didn't care too much about this. Fixed ideas were not so easy to break. The seeds of hope had been sown and would slowly grow. Seeing that Batman's team was not tired of learning, the young lady didn't forget her own brothers. Although Thea felt that the average education level of the Green Arrow team was only in junior high school, she still brought a pile of learning materials back to Star City. When she returned to the secret base she opened, the current Green Arrow base, she found that there was one more person there. Roy Harper, Thea's lover in the original spacetime, was currently being trained by Oliver. It's so lively. Thea wanted to laugh when she saw the bustling scene in the base. 2 green arrows, 1 black arrow, and 1 red arrow who had yet to graduate. This must be the Star City Archery Club. When she walked into the base, the 4 of them were training in full swing. Felicity and Laurel, who didn't know any martial arts, were watching them from a distance. However, after careful observation, Thea found that Laurel's fingers also had traces of archery practice, which made her even more speechless. Thea, the first person to notice her, was naturally Olivier. They all greeted her in a friendly manner. Roy Harper was also a little nervous as he thanked her for saving his mother. When she passed the study materials to them, their expressions were a little strange. Felicity, Laurel, and Shadow had all graduated from university, so they weren't under much pressure. They flipped through the pages seriously. Olivier, Tommy, and Roy Harper were all bad students. The first 2 didn't study hard, and the last one didn't study hard because his family couldn't afford to. The 3 of them had very poor foundations. Even though Sia had made it easy to understand when she wrote it, they still had bitter expressions on their faces. Thea felt that they could all learn. Olivier and Tommy's bodies had been modified by God's blood and genofluid. Their learning ability had surpassed the average level of smart people. As long as they put in the effort, it would be easy for them to learn. They chatted briefly. Thea found out that Olivier had met Batman through Laurel and Barbara's recommendation. Both of them had similar beliefs and experiences. Plus, Thea was a senior superhero. As a senior superhero, Batman told Green Arrow a lot about his experience. Green Arrow, who had been wavering, finally decided not to kill. After seeing the training of the 3rd-generation Red Robin, he also had the idea of training an assistant. After that, the brave and tenacious Roy Harper came into his sight. After getting the approval of the team, he began to train the young man. Under the relentless attacks of the archery club, the security of Star City had recovered. Olivier even defeated the Death Archer in a one-on-one battle and handed the captive of the Death Archer to Amanda, who came after hearing the news. With their series of victories, the underground forces of Star City were forced into hibernation. After leaving the Green Arrow team, Thea went to see Moira. Her mother had entered the 2nd year of her 2nd term as the mayor of Star City. The mother and daughter had a few intimate words. Moira had already let go of her daughter. She had flown too far and too high. Do you think my next step should be the Congress or the White House? Moira enjoyed the feeling of power in her hands. She knew that Thea now had great influence. She wanted to hear her daughter's opinion. If Moira had asked this question a few years ago, Thea would definitely have told her to stay in Star City. The outside world was too dangerous. But now that her vision was broadened and her strength had skyrocketed, the threat of the secular world and the universe to her was rapidly decreasing. There were definitely many who were stronger than her, but she was not very afraid. In the past, she thought that even if the sky fell, the tall people would shoulder it. Now, she thought that even if the sky fell, they would shoulder it together. So she decisively answered Moira, "President. Run for president." What was the point of being a senator? Although the president's power was limited, it was still awe-inspiring. Ordinary citizens basically knew who the president was. If you asked them who the senator of their state was, few would be able to answer. Moira herself was not weak. Her 2 terms as the mayor of Star City had ended. Her political achievements could blind many people. Plus, she was a woman, the first female president in the history of the United States. This attracted a lot of attention. Women's affinity was an important guarantee for the future uniting of the Earth's human beings into the interstellar era. When mankind carefully stepped into space, what they needed was not an iron-blooded strong person. That was purely courting death. Moira's background and her relationship with Thea made it very likely that she would be elected. Luther, a businessman, could run for president. Her mother would have no problem. Seeing Thea resolutely let her run for the White House, Moira was very moved. She did not have any dedication. She just felt that this was a crucial step to realize the value of life. Now that she had her daughter's support, thoughts instantly appeared in her mind. Which ally should she rope in and who should she make some exchange of interests? Thea encouraged her mother to run for president. Naturally, she also took defensive measures against her into consideration.